Thank you. So when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a hacker. Yeah, I know. But I really loved computers. I taught myself a few programming languages. I started dual booting Gen 2, and I figured, well, being a hacker is going to be the next step, right? But I didn't know how to get started. I didn't know any hackers who could teach me or have any resources to teach me how to hack, so I did the only thing I could. I went online and I tried to look it up. I found lots of really top-notch resources. They had tutorials that said they teach me how to hack. I downloaded all the tools that all the pro hackers use, and I spent several months at this. And after a little while, I realized, well, hopefully what all of you already know, which is this does not work. And so I was sitting there and I was like, well, what now? I don't have anyone else to turn to. There's no other way for me to learn this information, and I gave up, and that was it. The end. So several years later, I started studying computer science at Carnegie Mellon University. And my freshman year, a friend of mine came to me and he said, hey, we just started this group on campus called the Plaid Parliament of Pwning. And this weekend we're playing in a capture the flag contest. Do you want to join us? Now, being a computer science student without many friends, of course, I was like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll hang out with you guys. But I have no idea what capture the flag is. So it's actually really simple. If you're familiar with the playground game, it's exactly the same. The only difference is now the flags are digital. Well, now the flags are digital, and you play it on computers. And there's no running around, and there's no fields or anything. It's all on the internet. OK, so it's not exactly the same, but it's still really simple. So what you have is you have a set of flags, and these flags are on a server somewhere and associated with challenges. A challenge might be a web server that someone wrote in C and it has vulnerabilities. It might be a binary that's been compiled, and you have to reverse engineer it and try to find a serial number. It might be a file that's been encrypted and you have to decrypt it. It might be a web application that has SQL injection or something like that. So your job, well, you go in, you pick a challenge that you want to work on, and you try to recover the flag. So maybe you find a buffer overflow in this web server, and you exploit it, and you get a flag back. And this flag is worth some points in this contest. And the flag, well, maybe it's just a file in the file system or something like that, and you read it, and you just get this little string. So I'd signed up for this competition with my friends, and we were really excited. We read that the top teams from this competition would actually be flown to New York City, and that sounds pretty cool. So it came time to play, and we all met on campus in this small office off in the corner. And we were there 24 hours working on these competitions. So all day and all night we were working on these things. So we played this, and we got first place. And we were super thrilled. Now, I know you're saying, well, Tyler, that's because of all those tutorials you read in high school, right? Maybe not so much. I was definitely the worst person on the team by far. So at this point, I was a little bit scared, right? I was going in saying, well, crap. We're going to this final round in New York City, and here I am, a total noob. And I don't want to embarrass myself or my team, so what am I going to do? So if you're familiar with all great stories, the next part is the training montage. So I trained for the next month or so, playing old capture the flag contest challenges, talking to people on my team, so I wouldn't make a total fool of myself. Now, this seems silly, but this is actually a really important part of capture the flag contests. So they provide motivation. So just like Rocky wasn't motivated to stop being a lazy bum until he had a fight with Apollo, hackers can kind of get off their butts and start working when they're motivated by a competition. Now, you may be saying, well, wait a minute. I mean, it feels like I'm already doing computer security, and it's already a competition. We've got the United States versus China, or Tavis Ormandy versus all of antivirus, and this feels like a competition going on, right? Well, but it's not the same, right? These are never-ending battles, and never-ending battles don't have a winner and loser, which means there's no real incentive for you to try to go out and win. So it's not the same level of motivation. Capture the flag contests also have instant feedback. When you capture a flag, you know right away that you've got something. And this is very different from something like maybe writing a report, which you would do in some other competitions, because you might write something and it's wrong, and you don't find out for a week. In a capture the flag contest, you keep trying until you get what you want. And this also means that as soon as you get what you want, you get a little bit of an adrenaline boost, and this keeps you motivated. There's also a ranking system. When you're playing in these events, you don't just know what your own score is. You see a list of all of the teams in order. So this means you know who your worst enemy is. It's the person right above you. So you might say, well, if I solve this one more challenge, I'll move up one little place. And that motivates you to just push a little bit ahead. And you keep doing this until you're on top. But it's not just about teams, it's also about personal motivation. So all these challenges have point values. So in my first competition, I didn't do very well. Maybe I got 200 points or something. But I could say to myself, well, next time I'm going to go in, and I'll get 300 points. And so in this way, you can set these very reasonable goals and make personal progress that you can actually track. So I've been training for a month. I went into this competition, final round in New York with the rest of my team. And we won. We got first place. Again, super exciting. And you're probably saying, well, you trained for a month, right? I mean, that's all it takes. No, again, no, that's not all it takes, sadly. I was still not very good. I had improved, certainly, but I still wasn't where I wanted to be. So I kept playing. I kept playing with this team, and we kept playing throughout the year. And so we played in several competitions. We didn't win first place in all of them, but we did very respectably, and we were pretty proud. So at the end of the school year in May, it came time for Defcon CTF. So a lot of you are probably familiar with Defcon as the conference, but it's not just a conference. There's also a capture the flag competition associated with it. And this has actually been running every year for the past 20 years. So in some sense, this is like the World Series of these capture the flag competitions. So it's a really big deal to us. So we'd been doing pretty well, and we said, well, the next step is try to go on Defcon. So we signed up, we went on the online qualifier, and we didn't make it. We were the first alternates. We were just barely there, but we didn't make it. And now we're a competitive group of people, so I know if you have good foreshadowing abilities, you'd say, well, I know what comes next, another training montage. And that's exactly right. So what are we doing, though, right? I mean, we can't take the Rocky strategy of punching frozen meat. That doesn't really help with computer security. So how do we practice? Well, our team practices by participating in these competitions. Now, that sounds a little circular and silly, but it's actually the best way to do it. So it's not just these couple competitions that I mentioned. There are several of these competitions every month. And so you can use these to keep boosting your skills. Every time you play one of these, you learn a little bit more. So the more you participate in, the better you do. So you have to actually actively participate in these competitions. A lot of people will come to me and say, well, Tyler, I signed up for the competitions and clicked around, and I looked at the problems, and I did this 10 times, and I'm not any better. Well, yeah, that's not surprising. You have to actually play the whole competition, and that means playing from start to end, and sometimes even past the end. A good example of this, a couple years ago, there was a Russian competition. One of the challenges involved discrete logarithm calculation. We set some program, wrote something really quickly, and it took about 3 hours for it to run. And at the end of the 3 hours, it got the flag. The issue is that was about 10 minutes after the competition ended, so it didn't get us any points. Now, it's easy at this point to say, well, not a big deal. I mean, we got the flag, we solved the problem, wipe our hands clean of it, and move on with our lives. But that's not how you improve. So instead, I went back, I looked at this problem, and I found there was actually some structure that we hadn't really looked at that allowed us to parallelize it. So I wrote a solver on GPUs, ended up solving the problem that took 3 hours in about 10 minutes. This was a real solution that would have got us the points, and this is how I learned. The other aspect of these competitions is you can read write-ups. So a lot of the teams that solve these problems will document how they got the flags. So you can read through these if you didn't solve a problem, and you could say, oh, that's what I was missing. That's how I was supposed to do it. Similarly, even if you do solve a challenge, it turns out there's lots of cute tricks and other methods of solving these things that not everyone does the same way. So you can read them, and you can find out new ways and new tricks and things like that. So it's really nice. You just go online, you can Google CTF write-up, tens of thousands of results, and read through them. And lastly, although we try to play in as many competitions as we can, well, you aren't going to play in every single one, so you can still look at the problems from the contests you haven't played. So we've been training, and this paid off really well. We went back to New York. That was great. We got first place. That was no problem. We already did that. But then we went to South Korea. We went to South Korea and played in a CTF there. We got first place, and we got $20,000, which was pretty nice. And then we went to Russia. We went to Moscow and played in a competition there. Again, first place. So we were doing pretty well. Our team at this point had really grown and matured. And it's important to realize that these CTF teams are really teams. It's not a collection of individuals. And so this seems like kind of mushy, feely type of stuff, but it's actually, there's really practical reasons. The first is motivation. I said these competitions can easily be 24 hours. And so when you think about it, sitting in front of a computer for 24 hours isn't always easy. You might start checking Facebook or Twitter, or maybe you want to go to sleep. And that's understandable. But if you have someone next to you working, it's a lot easier to stay awake and stay motivated and stay focused on these problems. Also, having a team allows a diverse set of skills. I mentioned that not all the challenges are solved in the same way, so having different viewpoints from different people on your team can really help give alternate perspectives on these problems. And in a very similar vein, this allows for specialization. So for example, I'm very interested in cryptography. Someone else on my team might be very interested in Windows exploitation. So I can let them deal with understanding the latest EMET bypass. And likewise, they don't have to understand the intricacies of a subgroup confinement attack for Diffie-Hellman. And so we each get to focus on the things that we're really interested in, and at the same time, our team will improve greatly. So you might be saying, well, so does this mean if I want to pick a team, I should have them list their skills and throw out the ones that we already have? That's not how we do it. It turns out that what we've found is that interest and dedication are the most important traits. And this seems a little silly, but it's for very practical reasons. The technical skills are already there when we're picking players. And so what we really are looking for is people that are going to show up and continue to show up and have their skills improve over time. And so what we do is we invite everyone to come join our team, and the people that aren't dedicated, aren't interested, well, they just stop showing up. So it's a very self-selecting process, and this ends up with us getting the most dedicated, interested people, and after a couple of years, they turn out to be the best. So we've been doing this, our team had grown, now it's time to qualify for Defcon. So this year, things were a little bit different. They actually allowed us to qualify through winning certain well-known contests. So one of them was ICTF. And we won that, easy. So we had already qualified. But then we went and we also won CodeGate, which was another CTF that was a qualification. And then just to put the nail in the coffin, we went back, we played Defcon qualifier again, and we did well enough to qualify that way too. So we made sure that we really qualified this time. But we were getting ready for Defcon finals, and it turns out Defcon finals are a lot different from the Defcon qualifier. So in CTF nomenclature, there's kind of two distinct versions of CTF. One is called Jeopardy, the other is called Attack Defense. Jeopardy is the most common event, and it's also usually associated with online competitions, which is the majority of what we do. In contrast, Attack Defense is more traditional. You actually steal flags from other teams, just like you do in the playground event. Attack Defense is also in person, or usually associated with conferences and things like Defcon. So in Jeopardy, the organizers host all of the challenges. So they create these challenges, and they run them themselves on their own servers. Whereas Attack Defense, the teams host the challenges. So the organizers write them, but as a team, it's your responsibility to make sure the challenge is running and make sure that no one's hacking into it. So there's a lot of different categories in Jeopardy. And Attack Defense, it's basically just binary exploitation. And the names of these, well, Jeopardy, a lot of times the scoreboard, or when you pick challenges, it looks a lot like a Jeopardy board. You just pick a category that you're interested in, and then you pick a point value, just like Jeopardy. Attack Defense, well, things are a little bit more complicated. So you don't just pick that, you have to pick teams, and then you have to decide which teams to attack and when, and so forth. So it's a little bit different. So it's time for Defcon finals. We had qualified, and we went in, and, well, we did okay, not great. After a year of winning competitions, getting 7th place out of 12 teams didn't feel so great. We weren't super thrilled. But we at least made it to Defcon, and that was nice. Now, at this point, our team was about 2 years old. So what's kind of happening? Well, the original founder of the team, Brian Pack, graduated, which meant I was in charge. I was no longer the worst person on the team. I was actually pretty good at this point, which was nice. And so I took over the team. And the next several years, we continued to grow and improve. So the next few years, we not only went back to Russia and South Korea for these contests, we went to Japan and Taiwan as well. And we actually had to incorporate our team. We formed Plaid Parliament of Pwning Incorporated because we were winning so much money from these contests that we couldn't handle it any other way. So we were pretty happy. And I know you're saying, well, fine, but what about the World Series that you talked about, this Defcon CTF? So the next year we went back, qualified, no problem. This was a graph of the scores over time, about an hour before the competition ended. And this was it when the competition did end. So if you notice, there's another team that sniped us at the last minute. So second place. It's okay, you know, second place is pretty good, I guess, but we weren't super thrilled. So we went back. Next year, first place, much better. Not just by a small margin, actually by a large gap. And next year we went back and we did the same thing. So today, well, I guess I've actually become a hacker. But a reasonable question to ask is, I see you've been playing these games for the past 6.5 years. Does that mean anything about real security, or are you just playing these stupid little games? So obviously, I think I did learn a lot about real security. Now, in my view, CTF problems are almost like distilled real-world problems. So this means two things. The first is that they're more concentrated, in the sense that for the amount of time you put into them, you get a lot more out of them. But they also are made of the same stuff. When you do a CTF problem, you're using the same skills, you're thinking about the same problems that you think about when you're solving real-world security challenges. Now, I know you're going to say, well, fine, you can say that, but I don't believe you. Understandable, so let's go over a few examples. So first one, this is actually just a couple weeks ago. There was a news report about a vulnerability in FFmpeg that let people read remote files. Someone on our team saw this, and they said, wait a second. I did this 2 months ago in a capture the flag competition. Before this vulnerability was reported, they actually had to independently discover it over the course of this competition. Fine. Not exceptional, though. The year before that, there was a competition called CodeGate. One of the intended solutions for solving a challenge was to actually use a 0-day in bzip to get memory corruption. OK, the year before that, there's preparing for Defcon. What a lot of teams will actually do is find 0 days in utilities like Wireshark that a lot of teams use. So they're finding these and mentioning that they found these to attack other teams. The year before that, I actually wrote a challenge that used a undocumented bug in the Go compiler that allowed for running untype-safe code in what's supposed to be a fairly safe language. The year before that, there was a web problem. The intended solution was XPath injection, and the Dutch team that solved it, or one of the teams that solved it, they actually found a remote code execution bug in the PHP module that affected millions of users in websites like Yahoo. The year before that, at Defcon, there was a team that found a local privilege escalation bug in FreeBSD. So, yes, there's probably some real-world relationships between CTF problems and the security challenges that we actually do. But if that's the case, then why are we doing games, right? If I could have been doing real-world work for the past 6 years, why wasn't I making any money in playing these games instead? Well, there's a couple reasons. So the first is CTF problems have graduated difficulty. You wouldn't go up to a teenager who said, I want to learn to be a hacker, and tell them, well, here's a copy of IDA, go download Chrome and have some fun and find some O-days. They're not going to get anywhere. And similarly, these problems don't just start off easy, they actually get very hard. A lot of the more difficult problems are a lot more complicated and use some things that most people would never see in their day-to-day work. It's also, playing in these competitions is a relatively easy commitment. I mean, you do have to dedicate 24 or 48 hours, but it's a lot easier than telling someone, well, go quit your job and get a new job in computer security if that's what you want to be doing. That's not so easy. There's also no barrier to entry. You don't have to pay anything to join these competitions. You just sign up online and you can start playing. No one makes you take a test or pass an entrance exam. Again, if you wanted to do computer security for a living, it's not the same thing. You can't just walk in and say, I want to do security, and someone will give you some interesting work. And lastly, as we talked about, CTFs help motivate people. So kind of in short, CTFs work. They don't just teach you the technical skills, they also teach you the creative problem solving that only comes from doing practical, hands-on work. And so for training in computer security, I really don't think there's anything that can beat CTFs. So if you're like me, you're saying, damn, I wish I knew about this when I was a teenager. Yeah, well, I thought that, and our team thought that too. And there's not much we can do, but maybe there's something. So in 2013, our team actually created a competition specifically for high schoolers to introduce them to security. So this competition was fairly successful. We got over 10,000 US high school students to play. We got several schools and teachers involved as well, and it's actually a huge success. So you might be thinking, well, I'm not a teenager anymore. This doesn't affect me. Well, that's not true. It's not too late for you to do this. It's not just high schoolers or college students that play in these competitions. It's professors and industry professionals that play in these things too and continue to learn things. So if you've never played in a CTF, I encourage you to go out and do it. And I think your teenage self will thank you. And that's it. So, are there any questions?